Hi everybody and welcome back to Lost Genre Bridezilla, where we take a look at brides and wedding stories that are just surprising. So let's not waste any time and get started with the first one. This one's from user Ragana Wolfbane. So one summer Saturday when I worked as wedding planner, I was on site at one of our locations. It was a lovely garden area on the grounds of a hotel. We had a chapel and a bridge, huge weeping willows, a Grecian folly, statues, and a gazebo. Since it was a hotel, there was always lots of people hanging out in the gardens, which we did not mind so long as if there was a wedding going on, they kept their distance and were respectful. However, we got the occasional wedding party showing up to take pictures. Now, in Niagara Falls, you can't even wear a white sundress without someone trying to get more money from you. The open parks are fine for photos, but weddings need a permit, and anything inside, like the greenhouse at the Horseshoe Falls, you need to book, even if it's just for the pictures. And it is always busy. So it was normal for people to come and have privacy for photos. We even allowed couples to go take a pic there if they got married at one of our other sites, or even eloped in a hotel room. Again, with the understanding that if there is another wedding, we prefer if you stayed away. Two brides could confuse people, so we usually knew if one of these off-location weddings were going to be there for photos. We would ask them to be done about an hour before the booked wedding started, but this was not an everyday thing. Maybe a few times a year we would know that they were going to go and do this. So here I am running this location. We had 4 weddings that day. If I recall, the first at 11 and last at 5. While I waited for the next group to arrive, I often would go and pick up any garbage, check on potted plants and their water needs, vacuum the chapel area, etc. While I was doing this, I saw a few cars pull up on the far side of the property away from our main area. A bride and groom and friends. I figured they were not mine since my wedding was not for a while and these people were nowhere near the front doors. Again, this did not concern me since we got time. 1 hour later, the officiant is in my office filling out paperwork. I got the groom and his guys hanging out in the AC lobby. We still got half an hour. I got out to put in a CD to play in the background while the guests are arriving and make sure the Unity candle is ready, along with double checking if the AC in the chapel is behaving. I noticed the group from earlier was still there, now at the Grecian folly, which is right in our main area. So I go over to them to say they got to wrap it up. Hey, we're going to have a wedding starting soon, so y'all are going to need to leave now. Nothing. They actually ignored me. Hey, I say in my drill sergeant voice left over from Sea Cadets. We're going to have a wedding soon. Jandis from Charm says, So you're going to have to leave. No, I don't. This is public property, and I am Queen of Narnia, Chantelaine of Cair Paravel, Empress of the Lone Islands. Maybe I embellished that a bit. No, it's private. It belongs to the hotel. Hotels are public. My head begins to hurt. No, they are not. If you don't have a wedding here, you have to leave. I had my wedding here. We're just finishing up our photos. No, you didn't. What did you just say? No, you did not just get married here. Who the F do you think you are? I'll report you to the hotel. I had my wedding here and I can stay and take as long as I want. No, she could not, even if she was one of ours. Last wedding of the day, fine, but if there's another wedding, you gotta go home. Go ahead, I said, calling her bluff. Oh my god, the look on her face. She looked like the White Witch realizing that Aslan was back in town. Go ahead, I repeated. She did not say a word, just picked up her skirts and left. The best part, and it is petty, but I watched them go and she broke the heel of her shoe and fell down. Now, I did find this out the hard way myself while doing a wedding and trying to get out of picture range by going over the grass instead of pathways, and it is muddy as fudge at that spot. So broken shoe, mud on wedding dress, and a Karen humiliated. My work here is done. Man, some people who can just think they can bully others into trying to get something. Come on, that just sounds like those entitled parents who say, "I know the owner, I'm gonna get you fired," or something like that. Why? Honestly, you feel proud of doing that to others, bully them to get your way? Also, I don't know if OP had just watched or read Chronicles of Narnia, but she was hitting those references really hard. Alright, on that note, let's move on to the next story. This one is from user EdaPeach18. My friend and I have been friends for about 15 years, since high school. I was ecstatic for her when she got engaged, so of course I said yes when she asked me to be her maid of honor. When she started looking around for venues, she realized that having a wedding in the States was far too expensive and she couldn't afford it. Their parents weren't contributing anything. I told her that maybe she could just have a civil ceremony and a small cocktail party with appetizers and cake at a nice restaurant, but she said that wasn't wedding enough. She wanted to wear the white gown and have an altar and processional and everything. So then she decided to have a destination wedding at an all-inclusive resort in the Dominican Republic. The problem with that was that I was in the final year of my PA program and her wedding date was smack in the middle of the semester. I agreed to be her maid of honor before she decided to do it in the Dominican Republic, when I was under the assumption that it would be in the States. At the time, I lived in New York. I worked as a medical assistant by day and as a bartender by night to pay for school. I also went to school full-time and did clinical rotations. I lived with my parents to save money. I had little to no social life. My friend lived in Georgia. She was finished with college, was employed, had already paid off half her student loans, owned a home, and her life was generally more put together than mine. I was excited because I had never been to the Dominican Republic before, but also worried about the cost and how I would be able to take off from both my jobs and miss clinical rotations and class. 2 months prior to the beginning of the semester, which was 4 months before the wedding, I reached out to my professors and the director of the program and told them about my scheduling conflict and that I would have to reschedule one of my clinic days. They informed me that there was no way I could reschedule a clinical because hospitals cannot have more than a certain amount of students at a time for liability reasons. They said I should either defer my graduation by a year and return back to school when I didn't have these obligations, or I should reconsider attending this wedding. Deferring graduation, and for a wedding no less, was absolutely not an option, but I also didn't want to disappoint my friend. Even her own parents were on the fence about attending the wedding because of the cost. She actually ended up paying for her mother, father, brother, both her husband's parents, and the best man because none of them could afford it. I didn't want to be another disappointment to her, so I started reaching out to other students, begging them to switch clinic days with me. My search did not seem promising, so I did the grown-up thing and informed my friend that there was a chance I wouldn't be able to work for her wedding. She was upset, but with 4 months' time, I figured it would be better to warn her now and give her time to ask another friend to take my place. I suggested taking a red-eye flight down Saturday night after the clinics and I would still be there in time for the wedding, which was on Sunday early evening. Her now husband said no because I would miss the rehearsal dinner, which confused me because what's more important, the wedding or the rehearsal dinner? He also messaged me saying that I upset my friend and that I should apologize to her for causing her so much stress and that she was crying every night at the thought of me not coming to her wedding. Meanwhile, talks about the bachelorette party come up. I spoke with her other friends in Georgia and suggested several different dates that could work. All of them were turned down. Excuses like, "I can't do it that day, it's my niece's 3rd birthday," and "We can't do it Labor Day weekend because what if some of us want to go somewhere?" Keep in mind that I was still in New York and was trying to plan a party that would take place in Georgia. I eventually found someone to switch clinic days with me so I could attend the wedding. So then I got busy trying to find coverage for both my jobs. This whole process took about a month. Once that was all taken care of, I told her I was good to go for her wedding. Instead of being happy, she said, "Okay, but what about my bachelorette party?" The other friends ended up choosing a date in the middle of September without asking me, and of course, I couldn't make it because the semester had already started. I told my friend I wouldn't be able to make it to the bachelorette party, and again she was not happy. She asked why I couldn't take off another day from work or reschedule another clinic day. Her friend that organized the bachelorette party asked, "Why can't you just use your vacation days to come?" Because bartenders don't get vacation days. I told them that I simply could not afford to miss another weekend of work. There was no chance that I would be able to switch again. I started to get annoyed now because so far I'd spent over $3,000 for this wedding, and instead of being thankful that I gave up a week's worth of income and harassed every one of my fellow classmates, she was upset that I couldn't come to Georgia for a night to have dinner with her and her friends. I told her again that I was sorry, but the money I would have spent to fly down to Georgia for one night, I would put towards an amazing gift from her registry. I did want to do something nice for her bachelorette party, so I called the restaurant and had a huge dessert platter sent to their table. She thanked me for it when they brought everything to the table, but the groom just had to put in his 2 cents and said, "Just so you know, a lot of her friends are lactose or gluten-free, so most of them couldn't eat the desserts. You should have been more mindful of that." Excuse me? What? I didn't know any of these girls. If they liked my gesture, good. If not, I didn't care. I was doing it for the bride, not for the rest, and most certainly not for the groom. Finally, it's Friday morning, the day of the trip. I put all the BS behind me and just focused on having a nice time. I arrived at the resort with my now fiancé. We meet up with my friend and her now husband. I asked them about the itinerary. Imagine my surprise when they told me they had decided to not have a rehearsal dinner because everyone was going to be out on touristy excursions and wouldn't be back on time. I was beyond upset. This entire headache could have been avoided if I could have just come down Saturday night on a red-eye. Anyway, I tried to hide the fact that I was upset. My friend then tells me that she and her mother had an appointment for a hair and makeup at 12 the day of the wedding and that I could join them if I wanted. I asked how much it cost. I was expecting her to say it was her treat, but she didn't and I couldn't afford it. But I had brought my own hair tools and makeup to do it myself. Then she told me that the pictures would be in her hotel room at 3 p.m., meet outside at 3:45, and then the ceremony would start at 4 p.m. She never mentioned what room she was in though. So, Saturday morning, my date and I left the resort and explored the village. We came back at 3 p.m. Everyone else was still on their excursions. I texted my friend if she still wanted to have dinner that evening, instead of the non-existing rehearsal dinner. I did not get a response from her. I texted her again later that evening. No response. I bumped into her mother and brother and asked if they had seen her. They said they had not seen or heard from her all day. I walked around the entire resort and couldn't find her. Now it's the day of the wedding. I finally get a text from her saying, "Where have you been? We're in room 1234. I do my own hair and makeup and I'm in a room at 3 p.m., just like she had told me. We take photos, meet outside, start the ceremony, everything goes according to plan and is beautiful. After the reception, they all wanted to meet up at the resort bar. We are drinking and having a good time and call it a night at 2 a.m. We parted ways and everything seemed okay. The next morning, I flew back to New York and saw that they were posting wedding photos on Facebook. I texted her and said the wedding photos were beautiful and to send me the ones of us together. Then she went on this huge tirade about how I was a terrible maid of honor because I didn't spend the night with her in her hotel room the night before the wedding. She never asked me to do this, and that she cried all night. And she was mad that I didn't get my hair done with her, even though I told her I couldn't afford it. She said our friendship would never be the same and that her family hated me because I caused her so much stress. She didn't acknowledge the fact that I spent more money than anyone else, had to jump through hoops with work and school just to make it. Even their own parents were going to come due to costs. If she didn't pay for their families, there would have only been 6 people there. I finally went off on her and said, "Your husband made a big stink about me missing the rehearsal dinner, so I made sure I would be there, and then last minute you decided to cancel it because your family would rather be ziplining. If I had known, I would have come down Saturday night. then use the days off from my work and clinical to go to your bachelorette party instead. You didn't tell me what room you were in, you didn't answer my texts. Even your mother and brother had no idea where you were. Do you have any idea the stress and headaches you caused me? I am the most hated person in my program because I annoyed everyone non-stop. I missed out on a week's worth of income to be there. You didn't want to have your wedding in the States because of the high cost, so instead you decided to have a destination wedding at the expense of your guests, and yet you had to pay for your family members to be there. Was it better to have your wedding there if money was tight? Her only response was, "Sale reception was bad down there, that's why I couldn't reach you, but there's still no excuse for why you didn't spend the night before or get your hair done with me." That's what maid of honors are supposed to do. You treated my wedding as if it was a vacation for you and your boyfriend. She totally ignored every single valid point I made. My friends and family thought that it was ridiculous that she basically just took my generosity for granted. In hindsight, I wish I had never agreed to be her maid of honor. Our relationship was never the same. We didn't talk for months after the wedding. Then, about 6 months later, she randomly texted me saying, "I miss you." I never got an apology from her, and we are still very distant to this day. I learned my lesson the hard way, and it was a very expensive lesson. Wow, this was like a mixture between Bridezilla, horrible friend, and Groomzilla / moron who sticks his nose in other people's business. The fact is, the friend did not acknowledge any of the sacrifices that her maid of honor was making to get to her wedding. I have no idea how much money a wedding costs in the US, but paying for all her relatives to fly down to the Dominican Republic in an all-inclusive resort sounds expensive just as well. I think OP definitely has a point there. Alright, well once again we've reached the end of the video. If you liked it, go ahead and click like, and of course subscribe and join this community. Also, don't forget to go to Reddit and subscribe on the Lost Genre subreddit. I'll leave a link in the description. Having said all that, I'll see you on the next video.